Hi, everyone. My name is Nia, and I'm the author of the upcoming book Pockets of Joy, soon to release on November 10th, 2026. I still feel like this is unreal. I don't, 2 years ago, if you had asked if I was going to be writing a book, I would have said, no, I don't think so. And here I am in front of all of you, sharing my story and my book on this audience and beyond. So thank you for being here, and I'm excited to have this time to share a little bit more about what the book is about. This book, which is Pockets of Joy, is based on my own story post-divorce. A couple of years of life transitions that I felt were very meaningful and growth years for me. And my hope is that by sharing my story, I can hopefully help others who may be going through a similar journey. It shares a lot about how I navigated those times, sometimes in a scrappy way, sometimes gracefully, sometimes with humor, sometimes with gratitude. But the bigger learning was that, I got through it in a way that felt, now looking back, a very prescriptive, goals and clear anchors that helped me get to where I got to. And so the hope for this book is not to just share the story, but also to be able to share a prescriptive memoir that can pay forward by sharing some of that, what worked and didn't work with all of you, and especially for those that might be going through a tough transition. I wanted to share as part of the session as well some excerpts from my chapters. And I wanted to start by sharing one that is towards the beginning of the book around some of my Indian roots. I was raised in Mumbai. I was also raised in Boston after my family moved to the US in my teen years. And I spent most of my life in New Jersey in my adulthood. However, I think coming from the deep Indian roots and also being closely connected to the Indian American community had its own blessings as well as nuances as I navigated the chapters of my life post-divorce. And I wanted to share a piece that goes back to some of my memories of being a part of the Indian American community. So here's the first one. Growing up with deep Indian roots has always been one of my greatest blessings. My culture wasn't just something I inherited, it was stitched into the rhythm of my everyday life. I loved making Indian food with my mom, the sound of mustard seeds crackling in hot oil, the aroma of fresh coriander filling the kitchen. I loved Bollywood, the music, the drama, the unapologetic emotion that made even the ordinary moments feel cinematic. And every year, without fail, I danced at Navratri until my feet throbbed and my heart felt full. The fireworks during Diwali, the modaks during Ganpati, and the kites during Sankrant, these weren't just festivals. They were belonging. They were community. They were home. But the same roots that grounded me also created boundaries, especially as a woman. Even though I grew up in a progressive family, the larger Indian community, especially in the highly concentrated areas like New Jersey, had its own unspoken rules. We celebrated everything loudly: weddings, births, festivals, but we whispered about the things that truly mattered: mental health, depression, suicide, divorce. These topics were many a times treated like shadows. Everyone knew they existed, but no one dared to name them fully. So this was one of my first excerpts that I wanted to share with all of you. Really goes into the reason why I began this book, to be able to be that voice, because these are conversations that typically people in certain communities do not have. And so to be able to start these conversations in itself felt like a win for me. The second excerpt is through the middle of the book, where I speak about having to leave some of the things behind as I began the new chapters through my divorce. One of them was having to leave my home of 15 years where I had raised my boys. It was a really tough time. And I think looking back, I realized how brave I felt. I put on a face, but how hurt and angry I felt in the moment. And this chapter really truly goes back to trying to stay strong through it, but really knowing that it was a lot to handle in that moment, and being able to give myself grace and forgiveness for those moments where I felt like I had to be strong, but I didn't need to be strong. This particular excerpt from the chapter is about my willow tree, which I absolutely loved. And leaving the house felt much harder. Actually, leaving that willow tree in my garden felt much harder than having to leave the tree itself, leaving the house itself. I walked out through the garage for the last time and stepped into the front yard. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that only exists before anyone else wakes up. My feet carried me towards my willow tree, almost on their own. I moved slowly, afraid that getting too close would make everything feel too real. But the moment I stepped beneath its canopy, the familiar hush wrapped around me like an old friend. A single dewdrop slid off a leaf and landed on my wrist. Cold, startling, grounding. It felt like the tree's way of acknowledging me one last time. This tree had seen everything: storms, summers so hot the air shimmered, winters that froze the ground solid, birthdays, arguments, laughter, late night talks, quiet mornings, decisions made and unmade. It had watched my boys grow. It had watched me grow. It had held our lives in its shade. Memories flickered through me like an old film reel, the boys running around it, rain dripping through its branches, sunlight filtering through the leaves, the three of us sitting beneath it on a long summer evening. For a moment, I wish I could dig up the entire tree and take it with me, roots, soil, history, and all. But life doesn't work like that. Some things you carry only in your heart. Thank you, I whispered to the tree. Then I turned, walked to the car, and closed the door behind me, leaving the house where I had raised my children and the tree that had witnessed it all. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel healed. I didn't feel ready. But I did feel something small and steady, a quiet knowing that I had done the hardest part. I had let go. And in that letting go, I had taken the first real step towards new life. This is one of those chapters that always brings tears to my eyes. I can never read this chapter without tearing up a little bit. So I may be tearing up a little bit now, but it was one of the toughest moments of my life to have to leave um, a place that felt familiar, a home that felt familiar, a family and a neighborhood that felt familiar, and walk into an unknown. And it was scary, it was fearful. And I'm really happy that I can look back at it and say that I did it. But in that moment, it was probably one of the toughest things that I had to do. The next um, the next excerpt that I want to read is actually about towards the end of the book where I have moved into my Jersey City apartment and I feel like I am on the right, I'm heading in the right direction, doing all of the right things, and suddenly it hits me that I am on my own and the boys have moved over and gone to college. It's called Snakes and Such, The Empty Nest. Yes, baby, I had a great time. I can't wait to tell you more when we meet. I returned from my trip energized and ready. I had started a few pages of writing. I had made new friends, and I was on this road to recovery. Yes, most importantly, my boys were settled in college, and the new normal had officially arrived. I was incredibly proud of how well they had navigated this year. While I was still overly cautious, always watching from the sidelines, I felt like we had finally found a rhythm. And yet, every time I hung up the phone, it hit me like a thousand bricks. What was this feeling? I was overjoyed that they were happy, yet I missed them with a physical ache. I missed them hovering in the kitchen, the constant hum of their chatter, and the obstacle course of lacrosse sticks all over the hallway. This past year felt like a marathon of grieving. Yet when I returned from my trip, the big, inevitable I had been avoiding was waiting for me at the door: the empty nest. How do you prepare for the silence of an empty nest? In a year that felt like a hurricane, I never truly had the stillness required to grieve the end of this beautiful chapter of motherhood. Now in a place of my own, the silence gave me the room to finally recognize it. The furniture assembly had gotten done. But how do you know and how do you get through the real stuff, the unpacking of our boxes? I started to unpack their boxes, and memories of our travel adventures started to spill out. I always wanted them to see the world, but more than that, I wanted them to see the world. I wanted to see the world through their eyes. That had always been the true joy of travel for me all of these years. I smiled tucking away Christmas cards from their years past, those chubby cheeks and forced outfits, the annual holiday mailing ritual that felt like a chore then, but feels like a treasure now. I'd walk into the room where I'd gathered their world, the trophies, the blankets, the beds. I've plastered my favorite photos everywhere. I stand there like a fool, staring at those baby faces, half expecting them to turn around with a wink and loud mommies. I find myself smiling at the horror they put me through too, dropping bloody mouthpieces into my palms after their taekwondo matches, passing out in my arms with broken bones, the monkey bar mishaps, running to me with a missing fingernail after a lacrosse game, and the obsessions, the snakes, the reptiles, frogs, dinosaurs, enough to last several lifetimes for sure. The long lectures on distinction between different species of dinosaurs, the forceful weekend trip to that new Titanable exhibit at the museum, the analysis of the deadliest snakes, it was all too familiar, and yet felt so distant now. My apartment is now a gallery of their childhood. These were the only things I carried to my new life: middle school art, lopsided sculptures, mommy notes, and gifts made with sticky hands and pure love, tucked safely in those boxes, the beloved Captain America shield and the mask of Thor. So that was the excerpt from when I started to move into my Jersey City apartment and find a new grounding and a new foundation, and where some of that true finding myself began. And I can't wait for all of you to read my book, and see where this journey goes and took me. It is going to be coming out very soon on November 10th, and I can't wait for all of you to read it. Feel free to reach out on my Instagram handle, and I look forward to hearing from all of you. And I would love to get some feedback on what you think about the book once you have read it. Thank you so much.